Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. Top of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lifeline. We're your hosts, life coach and motivational speaker, Bo Powell, social media influencer and owner of the For Real brand, Linksburg Petway, and yours truly, leadership coach and mental health advocate, Barry J. Elliott. You can visit us at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and now on YouTube. Today, we are blessed to have recording artist, musician, author of Daddy Issues, pastor, vice president in the University of Pennsylvania's Annenberg School of Communication, husband and father of 5, Reverend Timothy Wortham Jr. Mr. Wortham, Reverend Wortham, Pastor Wortham, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, but just for the sake of clarity and integrity, I'm a senior director. I'm not a vice president yet. I don't want nobody to watch this and think I'm misrepresenting myself.
Okay. All right. I won't get you in trouble. Don't get you in trouble in Ivy League world.
Please don't. Please don't.
So before we actually begin today's episode, I want to acknowledge today, April the 4th, as the 57th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, Tennessee, while he was championing a cause for the equal pay for African American sanitation workers in that area. And so as I thought about that, I was just thinking about just the necessity of having multiple streams of income. But I want to talk about it, first of all, just in general terms. So, Tim, it's a two-part question. Tell me why, in general, do you think is important for people to have multiple streams of income? And then come from an African American's perspective and tell us why you think it's important for us to have multiple streams of income.
I mean, well, in the current moment, especially, we're dealing with things like inflation and all sorts of folks losing jobs and things of that nature. And so to rely solely on one stream of income puts you in a very, very vulnerable and often precarious situation. And so it's just for sheer survival at this point, it becomes important to have multiple streams of income. And for those of us who are people of color, we're under attack. Let's call it what it is. And so there are so many opportunities that are being lost in the name of DEI, which let's understand what is intended by the use of that term, the weaponization of that term. And so we have to make sure that we put ourselves in a position where we are not at the mercy of those who make these decisions about what opportunities we have and how we get to feed our families.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously we know that you have several different things that you do. You're an author. You also you're a product of our topic of the show, having multiple streams of income. So has that always been the goal for you? Is that an intention of yours, or did it something just kind of happen organically as you were just on your journey? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so for me, it definitely happened organically because the first additional income stream I ever had was through music. But I grew up in the era where the church musician was a volunteer. And so for the first several years of me playing at church, I never received any money. I also was raised in a home with a single mother who only had one income. And so I didn't have it modeled for me as something to aspire to. And so once it happened, it was just kind of like, oh, wow, this is different. I'm still pretty young. I'm working like retail jobs. I'm not yet in a career, but for the first time in my life, I found myself having multiple streams of income. Unfortunately, it was at a stage where I was not a good steward of those streams. And so there was so much more I could have accomplished had I had been properly educated, had I had a better example of how to invest and things of that nature that would have positioned me much better for later on in life. But no, it wasn't a goal. It wasn't a goal at all. And unfortunately, I don't think it's a goal for many of us. I think that we feel like what we need to do is find a good job, work that good job, and hopefully that job covers everything. And unfortunately, that's just not our reality in most cases.
What I'm finding with a lot of young people that they are changing that mindset. They're trying to do multiple things and be the boss. Is it important that you operate in what you are gifted to do, or do you just look at the hottest thing and say, let me try this, or let me open a food truck? I'm good at this. This person was successful with a t-shirt business. Let me try that. Because I had conversations with people and they said, well, you should do this. But I'm thinking, and you are very successful with it, should it be in something that you're gifted to do or purpose to do?
I think it's always best to go where you are graced. You know, even in terms of, I love to look at how ministries have these trends, and this one big ministry is super successful. And so everyone looks at what they're doing and they try to do that, but they're not graced for it. They don't have the resources for it. They don't have the personnel for it. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the knowledge. And so the same is true when we try to pursue these multiple streams of income. I may have a friend who's in a position where he can invest in properties. I'm not at that place. And so that's not going to be the path I'm able to follow, even though he has success there. And also, he can go in there and flip these houses himself. I would have to hire other people. So now my multiple streams of income, this stream actually becomes an expense before it becomes revenue. And so it's best for me to go where I have the expertise. It's best for me to go where I have the knowledge. It's best for me to go where I have the resources. And I would say it's best to go where I have the passion. Because what I don't want is for my secondary or any other streams of income to be the burden that my primary stream is. Because usually before I get to the passion, I have to work something that allows me to afford the passion. And then I work the passion until the passion can pay for additional passions, right? So I have this 9 to 5 that I call the grind. And then the extra things, I would prefer to be things that I can actually enjoy so that I'm not being drained every place that I'm trying to gain income from.
So with social media and Instagram and TikTok and all of these successful stories, like the one with the guy sticking his face in the water and everybody's doing it, these trends and people look at that. How did you navigate to your streams, if you don't mind sharing? Was it easy? Was it hard? Did people come to you?
So again, for me, most of the things that the spaces that I've found myself in, even my career, it has not been intentional. It really has been for me following my passion. And so when I started playing, I just loved music. Music was what I did in middle school. Music was what I did in high school. And so when I started playing for the church, it was just kind of this natural progression. It was something that I really, really enjoyed. When I sat down to write the book, the purpose was never to make money off of it. The purpose was, this is something that I think could potentially help folks who are dealing with some things that I've dealt with, some things that I'm currently still processing. And in sharing my story, I think it could be a blessing to others. And if by chance, it turns into some revenue, then that's all fine and good. But it wasn't like I sat down and said, all right, what can I write about that's going to be a New York Times bestseller and get me a multi-book deal and that sort of thing. I just sat down to do the work and allow it to take me wherever it took me. Now, there are moments where I've looked at some things and I've tried to have viral moments. And for me, I found that I can't create them. Either they happen or they don't. I have one video that I posted that has, like, I don't even remember how many views, but the most views of any video that I've ever had. And it was just me we have practice rooms here on campus playing and singing You Are My Strength because it was in my heart after hearing someone sing it at a concert. And for whatever reason, it resonated. It wasn't me sitting down trying to create the moment. And sometimes I think that our mistake is in really trying so hard to create a moment instead of just trying to follow where God is leading us and where he's gifted us or where he's graced us or where our passions lie, and then allow the work to do what the work does.
You said something that was profound. You said that if you're not careful, your full-time job will end up paying for your secondary incomes, and so that it becomes a liability. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, no, for me, the blessing of the full-time job is that it helps to finance the passion. So it's not a
Yeah.
liability. The full-time job is my asset for as long as I need it to be. I think
Hmm.
ultimately the goal is that the passion matures to the place where the grind gets left behind. And
Yeah.
now I can pursue it's the old saying, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. That what I'm probably misquoting it a bit, but that's always the dream, is to get to the point where the only work I'm doing is things that I'm passionate about. But for most of us, we have to do the things that we've studied, we have to do the things that we've learned and that we're good at to finance the things that we really love.
So how do we disclose or destroy the myths or the roadblocks of creating multiple streams of income? Because a lot of people think about it, they want it. I was just having a conversation with Barry last night, and I had a certain ideal I thought I was going to go do.
Mhm.
And sitting and talking with this consulting group, they turned it around and said, no, that's not what we need to do now. This is the vein. And it was, as I told Barry, it was something I thought about, 6 years ago, but it was a part of my passion. And he said it was a direct progression of where you are now. So, what are some of the myths that we can destroy when trying to create multiple streams?
Uh, I think one is that, multiple streams of income automatically means I have more jobs. I got to go work for somebody else. So many people have gifts that they are just kind of sitting on. You're super creative. You have a product, you have an idea, you have intellectual property that you can monetize. And the question is, how do I monetize it? And I think that's probably the biggest roadblock. It's not what do I have to offer, it's how do I monetize what I have to offer? How do I market it? How do I get it out into the hands of people who could really appreciate and enjoy it? And that's where we have to be humble enough to say, I need help, which is probably the second biggest roadblock. Usually, people who are pursuing a secondary stream of income are in a position of desperation. That's why it's so easy to run out and just get a part-time job, because it seems like a quick fix. And if I just go get a part-time job and nobody necessarily knows about it, they also don't know that I'm struggling. I think humility says, I'm going to get the help I need so that I can go from surviving to thriving. And if that means I have to be vulnerable in this moment, if that means I got to share a little bit of my business, our people, we're accustomed to a culture that says we keep our business in-house and we don't share it, broadly. But if I'm trying to get somewhere, I can't get there through pride. I can't get there being prideful. Or I can, but it's going to take me a lot longer because I'm going to have to do everything myself.
Mhm.
And so I find myself reinventing wheels instead of asking the person that built it the first time.
Yeah,
And
that's a really good.
go
Go
ahead. I'm
ahead.
sorry, Bo.
No, I thought you were, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brother William, but one of the things you had mentioned early on, is you said you wish you would have had someone who could have helped you cultivate it.
Absolutely.
Even Lynchburg, he talked about a consulting group that kind of helped to redirect them, show some things. So I have one of my mentors in my life, he always asks the question, is there a shortcut to success? And most people say no. But he says, no, yes, there is. It's called mentorship.
Absolutely.
So how important is it, for us to have people in our life that could help us to see our gifts? Because, I mean, if we can be really honest, when we talk about finding your purpose, sometimes that can be really abstract and hard to find,
Yes.
on your own. So, can you speak to the importance of having or surrounding or connecting yourself with people who can help you to recognize their gifts, see the greatness in you, and maybe if not help you directly, point you in the right direction? Can you speak a little bit about that, and has that been a part of your experience now that you're in, having multiple streams of income?
It's absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. And in here on campus, we have what we call mentors and we have folks that we call sponsors. And so you have folks who pour into you, who make sure you have the tools, but then you also have folks who open doors for you and put you in positions. And so I have been fortunate to have both. I started at the University of Pennsylvania in the late 90s as a temp. One of my jobs was First temp role I had here was stuffing envelopes for a mass mailing for a survey project, a research project here on campus. Another one of my temp jobs was uh, processing applications. I was working with the admissions team, and so after they went in and had their decisions, I had to do all the paperwork, just paperwork. My first job on campus, I was administrative assistant at the dental school. And so to get from an administrative assistant to a senior director level role, you do not get there alone. You do not get there alone. I had one woman who hired me as an administrative assistant at the Wharton School. She left, she went to the school of social policy and practice, and she called me one day and said, I have an annual giving position here, and I know you've never done this before, but I think you can.
Mm.
So her ability to see something in me that, number one, wasn't on my radar, I had no sense of, and most of us don't, I had no sense of this field of development, fundraising for higher education. It's not so, I never had a fundraiser come to my high school to career day. This wasn't something that, like I said, it wasn't an intentional career choice. At church, the pastor that I had at the time who said, look, go ahead and play the keys. I had never played keys before. I studied trombone. But his faith in me, his trust in me to say, go ahead, make all the mistakes you need to make, you'll figure it out. And going from just kind of plunking around to at one point being the only paid musician on staff at the church.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great. I mean, that sponsorship piece is one of the things that I think is really missing in our community.
Yes.
And one of the things I think we need to pay attention to. And that's one of the things that three of us have been focusing on collectively and individually, that sponsorship, just giving people knowledge or opportunities to grow.
Agreed. And for those of us who have kind of progressed and matriculated and gotten to a place of influence and gotten to a place where we are able to create opportunities, we have a responsibility to not be satisfied just being mentors. We have to commit to being sponsors. Because sometimes we get in a place of mentorship and we feel like we've done our job. But what about that next step? Some people need that next step from us. There are some mentees who will get it, they'll take it, and they'll run with it. And then there are others who will just need that extra little something that puts them in the position, and then they'll blossom.
Yeah. Me and Bo were talking last night, and Tim, this is going to be no surprise to you, but he said something about someone had listened to our podcast and they were talking about my voice. And it was like he could be doing commercials and voiceovers, all that kind of stuff. And I said to Bo, I said, I'm at a place and I said, I can't do it by myself. I said, because I have too much going on. So I can't be the one that go find the opportunity because I just have too many things on my plate. And so when you were talking about being humble enough to admit that you need help, that resonated with me. Yeah.
And I also think, just as we were talking, I was just thinking about how important it is that we celebrate, I would just say normalness.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that, we tend to elevate, the athletes or the actors. And so you have, a certain portion of our young people that's their only aspiration. And there's so many other things, like you said, that you could be successful in, that you could take a gift and monetize it, especially now. So, when we begin to celebrate, the doctors or just, teachers or educators or whatever the case may be, because nowadays, you can be successful and have multiple streams in just about any arena,
Absolutely.
especially with digital products. And so can you kind of speak on a little bit about just the importance of, I guess, exposure? Because one of the things you said, it's like, I never had a fundraiser come, told me that this was something that was even a viable solution or a viable way to make money. So how important is it today for our youth and even some of our adults to kind of get outside of our boxes and our silos to see what's possible out there?
Man, it's funny because you're making me consider it now because it's not, I can tell you I think that since I've been in this sort of role, I've only sat on like one career panel. And so I haven't had those opportunities. So I think part of it, first and foremost, it's very important. It's very important because the more opportunities that people are exposed to, the broader their horizons and the more expectations can be developed. You know, when you are so narrowly focused, when you grow up believing that the only way you can be successful is to be on screen or on an athletic playing surface, then everything else feels like failure. And to your point, in terms of just the multiple streams of income, that sort of thing, it's not that you have to do something that is extraordinary. It's that you have to do something well. So how about, you know, you were an honor student. There are so many folks who need a tutor. No, you're not going to be on a billboard. No, you're not going to be on the evening news, but you got a multiple stream of income. You got another stream of income because you're using what you have. You're using what you're equipped with. But that's the sorts of conversations that we need to be having. So I need to be able to say, yes, this is my profession, but I also have this going on. And I also have so folks know that these are things that you can do that don't require a bunch of extra training. It doesn't require a lot of investment. You already have what you need to create this multiple stream or this additional stream of income.
Yeah, that's good. And I think people need to understand the basics of like the sponsor that you had never did the job, but she saw your potential.
Yes.
And understanding that certain work ethic and the ability to navigate and be a critical thinker could also be placed over here and it will work there. Sometimes people think, I do this, this is all I do, this is the only thing I could do. I went from education to automotive sales and I had never done it before, but I understood how communication and being able to speak with people and build relationships could navigate to another arena.
Transferable skills.
Yeah.
And what you just described, though, gets to probably the third biggest roadblock, which is just fear.
Yeah.
What happens if you decide for yourself, but this is something I never did before? And so I'm not going to take this opportunity. I'm not going to take this risk. I'm not going to take this chance. What if I turned her down and said, no, I'm going to just stay over here in my comfortable cubicle and continue to answer these phones? You know what I mean? At some point, we take a chance. And every chance isn't successful. Let me be clear. Every chance we take doesn't end with this great success story, but sometimes they do.
You got to leap.
Yeah. Tim or Bo, one of you, just kind of for our listeners, just talk to them about the difference between a sponsor and a mentor.
Tim?
So in my experience, like I said, mentorship is really, it's like an advisor, someone who has the information, is happy to share the information, someone who is there to kind of polish you, who's there to smooth out those rough edges, to prepare you. Sponsor, on the other hand, is someone who says, I'm going to open the door. I'm going to give you the opportunity. I have this available and I'm going to put you here. Sometimes it can be the same person, but not every mentor has the power or the position to be a sponsor. And not every sponsor has the just the affect or the presentation to be a mentor, because it's a special type of person to be a mentor. You need that kind of grace and that kind of patience that not all sponsors have.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how important it is to have a network. You know,
Yes.
just as you were talking about, the sponsor, sometimes that means pointing them in the right direction of somebody who can,
Yes.
open door. Hey, I've got a friend who could hook you up, if you will, or, can give you an inroad to this particular place that you're trying to find yourself in. But just kind of through this whole conversation, and maybe some people may have missed it because you talked about it early. It just seems like, when you are looking to chase purpose, or if we were to reframe it, looking to a place where you can make a difference or make an impact, that could be a sign that could be something that God has graced you for. Would you agree with that?
I
If
do.
we're for those people who are really trying to say, okay, what am I here for? How can I really find those things that, can potentially work for me? You know, what would you say to that point? Because sometimes we say, hey man, you need to find your purpose, and that's always a very elusive question, you know. Um, But I think when you start to look for ways that you can find an impact, you may be able to find those spaces that really resonate with your heart and spirit. With that.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And it's
Mhm.
funny because for me, what I've noticed over time is if I sit and really examine, like if I'm observing the world,
Mhm.
the places where I feel most frustrated are usually the places that I'm called to serve.
Mhm.
And so if I sit back and I hear a story or I see something or I observe something and I feel that agitation rise up in me, there's something in me that can address that. And there are moments where my service to that thing is the thing that creates the stream of income, but then there are moments where my service leads me to the thing. And so that's why chasing the actual income has never been the answer for me. It's always been about chasing the purpose. And when I can't identify it for myself, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. I've had those who have been able to speak into me and say, you know what I see in you, and you know how you know why you feel the way you feel about that particular thing. And so again, I bring some of the onus back on us who are older and more seasoned, especially when we're talking about young people trying, because man, young people are bombarded with so many distractions and so much messaging that it's hard to kind of sift through it to find the truth of who they really are. Everything tells them to conform. Everything they see on social media, on television, everything is about fitting the mold. And purpose is usually just outside of the mold. You know, that impact lies in your difference, not in your ability to blend in. And so for those of us who have been able to find the courage, because it does require courage, to step into that difference, we are then responsible to show others the way.
Yeah, I think
Powerful.
that's powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful. So as we kind of begin to wrap up this episode of the Lifeline, um, Tim, talk to our listeners about how they can connect with you. I know you have some products. I know you're an author. Tell them about the book, how they can get access to the book. Your pastor, for those who are looking for church home or a covering, let them know how they can connect with you on social media, by email, maybe even book you, or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. So you can find me on social media, Tim Wortham Jr. I am on Facebook and Instagram. You can email me at tworthamjrmusic@gmail.com, and I'm happy to respond to any of your inquiries. My book, Daddy Issues, is available on Amazon.com and online at Barnes& and Noble. And my album, The Gospel Beyond Genre, is available on all streaming platforms.
Awesome. And just real quickly,
Yeah.
can you tell our listeners Daddy Issues? What is that? What is that book about?
So Daddy Issues is it kind of chronicles how I processed my father's abandonment. So he left our home by the time I was 4, and it just kind of talks about the impact on my decisions, the impact of his decisions on my decisions moving forward, and just the absence of all that a father is to not just a son, but children. And I wrote it as a man because this term daddy issues is usually thrown at or directed towards women. And us brothers need to realize we got our own set of daddy issues that we need to address and that we need to deal with and that we need to heal from.
Yeah, for some reason I felt like you needed to share what that book was about, and I
Yeah.
see why now. So, but anyway, so man, this has been a very powerful episode. I hope our listeners really caught on to how important it is in this time in this season to look at places that they can make an impact. As many people I know that are, feeling some type of way based on the climate of our country, the climate of our world. I think many times people tend to look at, okay, what somebody's got to do something about it, or they need to do something, not realizing that they are the they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity for you. And so I hope that those who listen in look at it as that, and especially as your explanation, Brother Wortham, about those things that agitate you could be a call for you to be the solution, to be the answer to that prayer. So thank you for this conversation. So this concludes another episode of The Lifeline with your host, BJE, Lynnsburg, Petway, and Bo Powell. Don't forget to check us out at www.simplybje.com/the lifeline and on social media. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household, so join us and let us hear your feedback because it's all about bringing life to you on the lifeline. Y'all take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lindsberg Petway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on the Lifeline. God bless.